For us, this is about balancing a budget and saying that when the private sector is paying in many cases twice what we're talking about for health care, and certainly more if they have a pension, most don't, it's realistic that at a tough time when the private sector for years has been making sacrifices to keep people working, we should expect the same from government. It'll happen to me, it'll happen to my family, it'll happen to my cabinet and the people in the legislature. It should happen to all of us. Well, for us, again, it's about balancing the budget. It has been, will continue to be, and will always be about balancing the budget. But to the extent that we can show the rest of the country that we can lead when it comes to budgetary reform, to fiscal reform, to really tackling the tough issues. But I think in November, voters certainly here in Wisconsin, but I think across the country, elected people to turn things around, to balance the budgets, to stop the games. I said earlier this past week that we're broke. And it's about time somebody stood up and told the truth, because for too many years politicians have ignored that reality. They pushed the problem off into the future. We can't afford to go any further. We've got bill collectors ready in the coming months if we don't take critical action right now. And I think here in Wisconsin, and I think the stakes are similar all across the country. I saw it firsthand as a county official when I tried to do things like ask for a little bit more from pension or a little bit more from health care contributions, or one point years past even tried to do a 35-hour work week as a way to avoid layoffs. The union leadership basically said, forget it. Go lay 500-600 people off. We don't care. I mean, that's where their mindset is. And so that's because they know the power of collective bargaining forces local governments not to be able to make those sorts of reasonable decisions to protect jobs. But it has a bigger impact as well. When you have people who are working for the government, who are forced to pay into the union, sometimes anywhere from $500–600 up to some teachers are paying almost $1,000 for union dues. When they're forced to be in that union, they're forced to have that taken out of their payroll. Those are things that ultimately take those dollars that we as taxpayers pay, and instead of compensating that teacher or that worker, we're ultimately paying a portion of that so that that union can come back and lobby for more government spending. It's a vicious cycle. And it's one where I think after this last election, people have realized, not only here in Wisconsin and across the country when it comes to states, but even at the federal level, we can't afford it anymore. We're broke. It is about time that somebody stands up and does something about it. And I think well beyond Republicans and conservatives, I think the average citizen in this state recognizes that. It's certainly, I think, one of the big reasons why they hired me to be the CEO of the state government. One of the great myths, unfortunately for a lot of the protesters out there, is that somehow if we pass our budget repair bill dealing with collective bargaining, that all their rights as workers will go away. Couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, as each day passed and more national leaders from outside of our state came in, the lies and myths got bigger and bigger along the way. The reality is Wisconsin, at the turn of the last century, passed the most comprehensive, the strongest civil service protections in the country. For our state workers, they have the right outside of collective bargaining. So regardless of their contract, they have the right, because of the civil service laws in this state, to have merit hiring and just cause when it comes to discipline or even to the point of termination. Those provisions, those safeguards protecting worker rights continue. What many union officials and many certainly workers are unfortunately believing from those officials is that somehow the collective bargaining agreement helps. It doesn't. It is in place just as much for someone who's in a union as it is for someone not in a union. And that's something I think the more workers in the state understand it, the more they realize that really these national leaders coming in don't care so much about their rights as much as they care about the money. And the money they really want is the money that right now by law each of those workers are forced to pay to their local union, which ultimately streams up to the internationals in Washington and across the country. They want their hands on that money. It's not about protecting the workers or the workers' conditions to pay, because the unions have already essentially given in on that. They said, well, we'll give you the pension and health care, just don't change collective bargaining and don't change the union dues provisions that automatically make them pay right now. We have ultimately have that sort of authority when it comes to state workers, when it comes to teachers and other local government officials. Those are dependent on their jurisdiction. That superintendents have already informed teachers in their given districts that if they fail to show up, that there's disciplinary action. Certainly we're going to support those superintendents who do that. In the end, though, what I keep reminding over and over again is even As the week began, we had 10, 15,000 people. It built obviously through the weekend. But the reminder for the public is there are 300,000 plus state and local government employees, teachers, city workers, county workers, state workers. The vast majority of them showed up for work. They did what we paid them to do. They're good, decent public servants. This has never been about an attack on the people who've dedicated their life to public service and government. Well, for us, we're willing to take all the time in the world to get this done. We're not going to compromise on the principle of balancing our budget. I said we can't turn to higher taxes. That would cripple the economy. We've seen other states like Illinois to the south who did it a month ago, and it's already having a devastating impact on their economy. Employers are escaping to Wisconsin, realizing that Wisconsin truly is open for business. We're showing we're going to lower the tax burden on our employers. We're going to make it easier to do business in the state. So to balance our budget, we can't turn to the path that they've taken in the land of Lincoln. Instead, we've got to make sure we make the tough decisions. But I think people respect that. It's certainly what they elected me to do. For us, ultimately, we're going to end up cutting more than $1 billion when it comes to local aids for schools, for counties, for municipalities, and to enable them to make sure that those cuts don't push off towards massive layoffs or to impacting kids in the classroom. We're giving them the tools in this bill to ultimately balance their budgets. They don't have that right now. This isn't something I've concocted. Local government officials at the school boards and city councils and county boards have been asking for this for decades. This will give them the power and the authority to make prudent decisions about balancing their budget that don't lay people off and ultimately don't shut down curriculum in the classroom. What we've pointed out is we don't have the savings in this bill, particularly for the next biennial budget. We're talking about the equivalent of 5,000 to 6,000 state employees who have to be laid off and a similar number of 5,000 to 6,000 local government employees. That's 10,000 to 12,000 people overall in this state who would be laid off if we failed to do that. That's unacceptable. We can't have anybody unemployed, be they in a private business or in the government. The last thing I want in the state, it's got a 7.5% unemployment rate. Granted, that's lower than the national average, but that's still unacceptable to me. I want to create an environment where we help the private sector create 250,000 new jobs, not put more people on unemployment rolls.